emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and,
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 014.HG0105, certificate number 29414. Adbusters.
Like so many others, I had become a slave to the IKEA nesting instinct.
Yes, I'd like to order the Erica Picari dust ruffles.
Please hold.
If I saw something clever, like a little coffee table in the shape of a yin-yang, I had to have it. I'd flip through catalogs and wonder, what kind of dining set defines me as a person?
Ba-da-da-da-da-da.
Adbusters! Who are you going to call?
Are we going to call Adbusters? Or that's who are you not going to call?
You need to be Adbusters.
Right.
You don't call Adbusters. You are.
Adbusters is a state of mind.
Adbusters is a state of mind. We're going to talk about the state of mind on today's episode. This is not going to be one of those episodes where I describe a kind of squishy doll from the 80s. No, this is going to be a show where we talk about our inner lives.
The 80s fetishizing will be back next week.
We are both living in a consumerist society.
Yeah.
Late stage capitalism, as we like to say.
Baby.
I don't actually like to say it. I feel like it's a phrase that
It's doomer to
has
you.
lost all its meaning, but
Well, it just seems very pessimistic. Like,
yeah.
the collapse is coming.
All right. But we definitely do live in a consumerist society, a capitalist society, a corporate dominated capitalist society. One might even say a materialistic society. I think that's not much of a stretch.
And now let's stop for our first ad break.
That's right.
John, what kind of deodorant do you use?
Well, and that is going to be a thing on this show because colonization of the internet, which was initially supposed to be a free and open Western horse opera,
Utopia.
Utopia, was very quickly and ubiquitously colonized by advertising to the point that it has exponentially more advertising than anything prior, if you took it all together, from the very first advertisement in ancient Sumeria.
Like when people used to sit down and watch Mr. Ed with their families, the ads didn't gradually kind of overlap the screen until you couldn't see the horse anymore.
No. I mean, the first pop-up ad was...
It actually killed a man. The first pop-up was so shocking.
Oh!
It was so shocking that the first person who saw it died
Well,
of a stroke.
the first pop-up ad actually was a knife blade that came out of a vending machine.
It was in a Jackie Chan movie?
But something has happened in recent years, in recent internet-based years, where there has been a surrender. A surrender to advertising like nothing we've ever seen. Because what dost one do? What caneth one do? Advertising, I mean, you can put all the ad blockers you want on all of your programs, but they get by. They sneak around. They get around them.
They're clever. They're cagey.
You have to pay for YouTube, but they still get in there. And of course, that wasn't always the case, and it's part of the it's part of why we are so dispirited, I think, because there was a time, not that many decades ago, when it still seemed like you could stand athwart corporate America's domination of the culture and say, stop, basta. It did seem like a thing that we could collectively do.
Like we could, not that individuals could opt out, but that we could change the flow of the river.
Yes, and a big
solidarity.
A big part, solidarność, a big part of that was based around the idea that what advertising was doing and what corporate America was doing was colonizing our minds. And that if enough of us resisted that, and not just resisted it, but undermined it, we could free other people's minds. It was an early version of wokeness.
Literally in the Matrix sense of take the pill that will let you see the terrible things that are happening here.
That's right. It was the plot of the movie They Live, where you put the sunglasses on and you realize that there are buy ads all around that you would not be conscious of. Also, there were aliens who looked like humans.
The aliens are metaphorical.
Yeah.
The aliens are the evil corporations.
But that movie, They Live, came out, and The Matrix a little bit later, during a kind of heyday, a last gasp maybe, of resistance to this kind of ubiquity of selling that we now not just take for granted, but have acquiesced to in a way that it no longer feels like you could mount a revolt. And I think a lot of, we talk now about the death of irony and what kind of is laughingly called a new sincerity. And what a lot of that activity is very earnest and direct resistance to corporate culture. It's actual protests. It is calls for legislation. It's a
direct action,
and a kind of with a revolutionary bent. But it once upon a time was much more. And this is the word materialist is a kind of it's an interesting word and a multi-purpose word in the sense that we often think of materialism as being consumerist or synonymous with
the pursuit of wealth,
consumption,
the fetishization of wealth.
But of course, Marxism is described. I mean, the dialectical materialism is Marx's description of his.
That means something else, right? That just means what? Referring to the material of the physical world?
Yes, but it's very different. Both capitalism, late stage capitalism, and its antipode, dialectical materialism, are both concerned with the material world. Neither of those philosophies is concerned and actively unconcerned with the spiritual and also the metaphysical, the emotional. Emotional worlds are employed to sell things, but a person's well-being is not taken into to account in kind of either of those ways of seeing.
And I suppose that in the Marxist framework, too often has the so-called spiritual just been co-opted by those in power. What's actually needed is for, the most desperate need is for the person, the worker, to figure out how to take care of himself.
Well,
right? To improve the physical world, their physical state.
The active critique of religion being the opiate of the masses. It isn't just that it's been co-opted, but that the idea of religion is what dulls you to being manipulated because it's given to you as an unreal salve to your material.
Right. And I've understood that's what, in context, Marx's use of the quote is to say that right now, Western Christianity in particular has fed you the line that you should not rise up against your oppressor because there'll be some kind of justice in the next world to come. And he's not against religion per se, but as long as you're getting fed that line, nothing's going to improve for you.
Right. But the what's left kind of what that
Right.
implies is that your material well-being is your well-being.
And I suppose that all religions to some degree have to embrace the fact that, you know what, there's something bigger than this.
Well, yeah. And
You should not be prioritizing.
And a lot of religions, particularly Eastern religions, emphasize that your material life is the opposite of what well-being is.
Hence the George Harrison album, Living in the Material World.
Right. And
He didn't want to be in the material world, and now he's not. It all worked out for him.
it's the opposite of the kind of material. What's the evangelical
The prosperity gospel?
the prosperity gospel? It's the opposite of the prosperity gospel. Your ministers are not supposed to be rich in a lot of Eastern religions. They are supposed to be the opposite of rich.
All they're eating is the oranges you left on the shrine.
Yes, if they're lucky. The
Yep.
rest of the time, they're just standing with one arm extended for like 15 years.
Hoping somebody will bring an orange.
There's been a resistance to capitalism for centuries. As soon as there was a capitalist, there was somebody that was like, "What?
This sucks.
No, boo." But the kind of metaphysical reaction to everything being a commodity really started to take a new tact after World War II, and the kind of it was a reaction to the fact that very clearly now consumerism was increasingly about associating desire with commodities.
Yeah, nobody was trying to remake your brain in the Industrial Revolution. They just wanted you to work your body to the breaking point.
Yeah,
but nobody was like,
in
hey.
reply, you would be able to take a train, or you would be able to, you know.
But this is, let me rewrite your soul.
Yeah, and gradually corporations, through advertising, sort of not just colonized public space, but they colonized psychic space, right? That we began to define not just our well-being, but our personal identities through possession of external either goods and services or possession of external signifiers.
Last entry, you said you now dream about polyester shirts. How do you think?
Say what?
You
No,
said
I did not.
Yeah, you dream about rayon aloha shirts.
Oh, well, I dreamt of a man who was wearing a rayon shirt.
Yeah,
I
but
don't
look what
particularly want.
Yeah, but look what happened. Like, your thought space was colonized by the people who want you to care about which fibers of shirt convey which kind of a look.
But the rayon Hawaiian shirts are all from the 30s and 40s, so nobody's trying to sell me those. But I believed that this person, you're absolutely right. I understood him to be knowable by the shirt, right? I saw the shirt and I said, I know you,
This
my
problem
friend.
started in the 30s.
Yeah. So that, recognizing that, the French, I know that you don't like talking about the French. I don't
the
either.
French.
But the French, of course, in the 50s, were really doing a lot of hard thinking around existentialism, and
They were boring their girlfriends.
they really were. They were. I mean, Descartes was in a Dodge Dart, and
They're putting out cigarettes in a runny omelet and a runny fried egg somewhere, and moping, existentialist moping.
but there was a group of kind of European theorists that kind of came up in the late 50s called the situationists. Are you familiar with the situation? You're nodding with some recognition.
I know about them. I kind of had a chance encounter with them through their idea of psychogeography.
Go on.
This idea that you can remake urban landscapes in, I still don't understand the upshot of the theory, in kind of whimsical ways where, redrawing the city around you is a way to throw off the shackles of the oppressor who actually tells you, here's what your life is, here's what your day is, here's what your street is, here's how you get places. No, the people should be able to overturn that with the power of the mind. How does this tie into situationist thought? I'm not clear.
There's a lot of situationalism, and they rejected situationalism, but a lot of the Situationist International was based around the idea that the culture had become the spectacle, that the spectacle was meant to, through just a flood of information and images and opportunities to buy and encouragements to see yourself as defined by your tastes and the commodities that filled those desires. There was this spectacle, and that it had colonized our psychic lives, so that we were no longer able to think independently.
Yeah, the self has been overwhelmed.
And so we become components in a matrix, I guess, where we're all living in a greasy chrysalis,
Nutrient bath.
and the aliens are sucking our life energy because we're an engine of some kind. None of that ever made any sense to me, but
I thought we had it coming.
But so what the situationists said was that there was something that we could do, and they described it as détournement. Détournement.
What does that mean? The tournament?
It was what does it mean? Détournement. It's all one word. Détournement. So not détournement.
Is it spelled the same way?
Well, Tournement.
Détournement. Is it like the turning?
Détournement.
Rerouting. Or hijacking. So I guess it's a metaphorical kind of reuse or redirection of resources or thoughts.
Yeah, it's what later became known as culture jamming. And what it is to take the symbolism and advertising and the kind of cultural, the mind-numbing consumerist imagery, and repurposing it satirically, repurposing it and annexing it, and then using it to espouse radical ideas. And this was a thing that they saw primarily as a realm that you would use art to accomplish, right? This was not direct action. This was shocking people out of complacency.
Well, it makes sense. If somebody's colonizing their brains and their aesthetics, you just need to redirect that. You need to give them a different, better aesthetic to get them back on the course.
That's right. And often the art was meant to employ humor, because, if you see something that's out of context, that's juxtaposed sort of against its original intention, and now is trying to communicate its opposite, there has to be that. You have to be both familiar with the original intent of the imagery and the iconography, and then have that shock of recognition and realize that it's now being annexed and deployed to communicate an opposite meaning, or a resistance meaning, a revolutionary meaning.
So are they kind of retooling the iconography and the logos of advertising, the language of consumerism? But now it's like, it's the equivalent of the shock thing where Mickey Mouse pulls his pants down or whatever?
Yeah, it's very varied. And of course, any art movement, you throw it to the artists and you don't know what you're going to get, but it's meant to be satirical. It uses parody, but it also I think that what we do is we become inured to seeing advertisements and the glitz and glamour of a consumerist public sphere, right? This isn't all happening just in television ads and every fourth page in a magazine, and it isn't stuff that you opt into. When you buy The New Yorker, there's at least 3 little cards that are going to fall out of it, and they're going to be ads for Chivas Regal or whatever.
Well, just driving down the street, you're going to see 30 logos.
Well, and that's what they were talking about even more, was that you do not acquiesce to that. Yeah. You have not bought in to just on the drive from your home to your school,
Here's the Golden Arches. and
seeing
here's-
80 ads
Yeah.
or 800 ads. And so your mind has to tune it out, kind of like we try to tune it out on the internet. Although the internet, because it's so focused on a 1 foot by 8-inch screen, how
It's
many
intrusive
times,
no matter what they do.
how can you avert your eyes? But as you're driving to work and you see all this intrusive advertising that you did not consent, your mind can blot it out to a certain degree. But when you see something that either is an altered version of a thing you see all the time, or something that evokes it, or something that, directly parodies it, and yet you're used to seeing it and tuning it out. When you see it and you have the shock of like, wait a minute, that's not the Golden Arches, that's a couple of boobs, or that's upside down, or it has a greater impact, or meant to have a greater
I
impact.
assume the idea is that in tuning it out, you've made it even more dangerous because now the agent has subconscious power over you.
That's exactly right.
Whereas if you were aware of it, you'd be able to struggle against it.
And so there was a lot of sort of situationist energy, but it was seen in the same category as a lot of postmodernism. It was
Game playing.
Yeah, and it was elitist,
Yeah.
even as it's Marxist.
Was it gallery art? Is that what it was?
Oh,
Or
no, it was
zines.
It was. There were no zines yet, I don't think, but it was. I think a lot of it was intended to appear in public space and interact with fashion and interact with the places where consumerism is sort of at its most caustic. But it was before an era where there was, it was a mass media era, but it was also a mass media era where the resources necessary to actually mount an advertising campaign, even if it, and especially if it was, and we'll see in a minute, especially if it was a culture jamming one, there just wasn't that access. There's not now either. But it, what they discovered was very quickly mass culture, the spectacle, recognized détournement and recuperated it.
What does that mean?
By a process,
co-opted it?
Where radical ideas were then re-annexed so that what you got was the commercialization, say, for instance, of punk fashion.
Yeah.
Or ecological language being used to greenwash corporate environmental devastation, or,
even something as simple as the self-aware ad that says, "Hey, I know you're going to hear a lot of ads, but I'm going to give you the straight talk." Like
even those award-winning Volkswagen ads where they spoke ironically about
Right.
Look at this little ugly car, and those won all the Clio awards for years. We see it a lot now in, I don't know if this is actually the term, but it seems like in the same way greenwashing is greenwashing, you see a lot of color washing now, where companies have extremely diverse ad campaigns.
I was walking in the London Underground this summer, and I guess Lego is 90.
Say what?
And the Lego company has turned 90.
Oh.
And so their ad campaign shows people of all races, colors, creeds, generations, grandparents with grandkids, elderly lesbian couples, everybody talking about their Lego history and their 90 years of playing with Lego. And there's like an elderly West Indian man, who's clearly, who's in one of these diverse kind of Benetton ads talking about his love for 90-year-old Legos. And I'm thinking, maybe he's paired with a multiracial family. And I'm like, how are we supposed to think that 90 years ago, this Afro-Caribbean guy discovered Legos with what, his white wife and multiracial kids? It implies that everybody's been doing this for 90 years, even though, the first 50 years of Lego's history is very white and Danish.
Yeah, right. Or 80 years of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Benetton. When Benetton, which was a clothing company, and I guess still is, Benetton ads, even in the 1980s, showed an incredibly diverse group of models, and it was radical
Right.
at the time. And now it's universal, and there are a lot of companies where the greatest, their progressivism is in their ads, and it doesn't reflect the actual diversity initiatives of the company at all. Right?
And it's been often deployed for shock value, like, oh, did we put a plus-size model in this commercial? Oh, sorry if that offends you. I hope you're offended. Please write about this.
Waka, waka, waka. Well, let's fast forward to the late 80s. In Canada, a man by the name of Kalle Lasson, who was a Estonian Canadian who'd grown up overseas and was a documentary filmmaker and had actually worked in advertising for a while in Asia, was now living in Canada. And it was during a period, late 80s, when the forestry industry in the Western states, Canada and Washington and Oregon, specifically BC, they were employing, this kind of clear-cut style of forest management where they went in and just shaved the mountains. A lot of BC was not really visible from the roads. It was, all these kind of the whole area there in Western BC along the water, very inaccessible, except the timber companies could go in and just mow the trees down.
Nobody would ever see it or regulate it.
And there started to be a backlash, cultural backlash in the West. This was during the spotted owl days up here, where the people started to rebel against this idea that the timber companies alone in a handful of corporate entities could decimate the forests, that through some combination of 150-year-old land use rights, they had acquired what we all considered public land. I mean, who does the forest belong to? When there are hundreds and hundreds of square miles of forest, how could that possibly belong to some how did we give consent to this? Right? So there was a lot, and again, it dates back to the railroads and all this incentive given to forestry companies to help develop the West. But the timber companies responded to this groundswell of protest that really threatened them.
Yeah.
By pretty much inventing greenwashing. And they posted all of these television commercials. They paid for a huge advertising campaign. A group called the BC Council of Forest Industries.
To this day, this kind of rhetoric seems very familiar if you're from the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
And you've seen any of these forestry industry sponsored museums or bumper stickers that say, "Yay, another working forest."
And I was just up at Mount St. Helens this summer and went into the Weyerhaeuser Museum that was so much better than the actual state-run Mount St. Helens Museum. And it was all about like, oh my God, can you imagine? Weyerhaeuser has done so much for us.
If they hadn't replanted all those trees, where would we
that.
be?
They've planted more trees in the last 6 hours than God planted in 1,000 years. It's like, I know. Anyway, the BC Council of Forest Industries had in 1988 a series of TV ads called Forests Forever. And they really poured it on what great stewards of the forests they were. And Kalle Lasson, as a filmmaker, was and as a kind of situationist, a proto-situationist, he was just so appalled by the cynicism of it. And he said, I'm going to make an ad. And he had a partner by the name of Bill Schmalz. The two of them collaborated on a television ad where a small tree was talking to a large tree, And the large tree was explaining that a tree farm is not a forest. And we experience this in the Northwest all the time. And you see it in basically most forests in Europe are managed forests.
Yeah.
And they aren't forests, they're tree farms. And we have watched a lot of the forests here in the Northwest turn into monoculture tree farms. I think Weyerhaeuser now is trying to not have it be a monoculture. They're planting 5 kinds of trees in even rows. But
it's not going to do it, Weyerhaeuser.
So Lazen takes these ads, these television ads, to CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company. And CBC said, and he's put together the money to buy advertising time to compete with the BC Council of Forest Industries. He wants to show these ads on television and on the CBC. But the CBC says no. These ads are what they called advocacy advertisement, which is verboten because it's too political.
Wait, you can't put PSA type ads on Canadian TV? I feel like US TV at the time, you could have advocated for a social cause in an ad by.
Well, it depends on whether or not, at least in this instance, whether or not your ad offended bigger advertisers.
And I guess is CBC state-run TV in a way that no U.S. network
Yeah,
deals with?
although U.S. networks also did not embrace, if you think about, there were PSAs because that's part of the FTC, accommodation of the public airways, that a certain, they have to, or at least they used to, have to air a certain number of public service announcements. But
there's plenty of campaign ads that are also strongly partisan.
Well,
I guess outside of campaign election season, there's not, huh?
There aren't a ton of situations where, PETA will have a PSA, but not, they're not really buying primetime advertising. What's the most activist Super Bowl ad you ever saw?
I remember Super Bowl ads have been turned down when people try, Planned Parenthood or somebody tries to buy a Super Bowl ad.
Right.
Or maybe it was from the right, but I have read about U.S. ad time getting turned down for the same reason.
Well, so Kali and Bill decide that this is now something that they are devoting themselves to, and they start a media foundation called Media Foundation. And they start to advocate for what they call the Media Carta, which is a new charter granting human beings the right to communicate without an intermediary in the form, without the public space being dominated by commercial
corporate
interests.
Actors, yeah.
Right. And they describe it as, in kind of parallel with the environmental movement, they describe it as the mental environmental movement. So the idea being that your mind and your identity are environments.
Also an ecology that needs to be protected.
That's right.
Okay.
And they aspire to clean up the toxic environment of the mind.
That really resonates with the 20th century audience who probably feels like their mind is kind of a death trap in there.
Yes, I definitely feel like my mind is colonized, right? I mean, you seem a little bit more immune to it, but I have an addictive personality and a fair amount of just baked in insecurity, and it isn't so much consumerism, but certainly a world of ideas I didn't welcome in.
Yeah.
That are in their, a battle royale, neighborhood stick fight between my ears.
Yeah, I feel like I have very little control over whatever the melody is that's running in my head, whatever the insecurity is that's running in my head. They don't seem like things that like a pre-industrial revolution farmer would have in his head. He might have intrusive thoughts too, but not at this pace and volume.
Yeah, right. And most of a 19th century farmer's intrusive ideas would be coming from the Bible or his one copy of Shakespeare's sonnets.
Well, they might be true also. It might be like, well, boy, what if
Well, if it's in the Bible,
what if
it's true.
What if the sorghum dies, you know?
Right. Well, and a lot of that is also materialist, right? There are people whose lives are dominated by real events.
Yeah.
Every superhero lives more or less an uncomplicated life because they're confronted with a villain and they fight the villain. And then at the end, they know whether they won or not because the villain's defeated. And I think a lot of people who regularly consume media now also in their lives, in their work life, for instance, they're trying to solve a problem. They come to work, the problem is identified, it's put in their in basket, they work to solve it, and it goes in the out basket, and there's a sense of completion. But a lot of this stuff is, a lot of this toxic mental environment is the result of work that is preying on your psycho-spiritual, right? Am I good? Am I healthy? Am I successful? Am I popular? None of it is really resolvable. There's no concrete problem, so there's no concrete solution, and it becomes a thing you cannot solve, and so you must keep consuming.
Which is perfect. Yeah, they'll keep selling you new things for that.
So Kali Lawson and Bill Schmalz start a magazine called Adbusters, and in 1989 in Vancouver, Canada. And Adbusters, the Adbusters advocates an active resistance to this kind of global commercialization of our interior spaces. And they advocate in a situationist kind of framework, actively combating the colonization of these public spaces and your private space where you haven't consented to it.
Is this like crazy leaflets you get in the mail, or like, is it a magazine with articles? They have scholars writing this stuff?
It's a magazine with articles. They have lots of scholars who are talking about this is very existential, right? I mean, a lot of these ads, but this is during a time when protest and art are really communicating with each other. If you think about ACT UP, a lot of the ACT UP protests took the form of art happenings, kind of. You know, there was a lot of art.
Because the art scene was being shredded by AIDS.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you think about even the protest movements around the Vietnam War, there was a lot of art used in those spaces, and some of it was ironic and some of it wasn't. Now, this is right around the time or during the same era. I mean, the famous quote was that when Henry Kissinger won the Nobel Peace Prize, it was the death of satire. Because how can you make fun of that? Robin Williams famously said, that satire isn't dead. He lives in the White House.
Yeah.
But the idea that it's impossible to satirize a culture that's already so ridiculous, it's impossible to discern, is this a joke or is this real? I mean, now every time you look at a news article, you're like, that could have been an Onion headline 5 years ago. And now it's like just full on reality.
On Twitter, often you have to like go back and get, spend 10 minutes getting context on the poster to find out, is this a gag or not?
Yeah.
Is
Which
this a
side
bit?
of this am I on?
Yeah.
Because it seems reasonable, but also the opposite is true. During the 2016 election, I wrote and recorded that song, Make America Great Again, where I recorded it in the voice of a MAGA hat, and put it out. Now, it went out on channels that were predisposed to exposing it to people that weren't going to take it seriously. But I hoped and prayed that it would find a real, nothing would make me happier than that it got played at a real MAGA rally. And eventually it did disseminate far enough that I started to get messages from people that were like, goddamn right, about time somebody had the guts to say it. And I sang it in a little bit of a ginned up American country ass accent. But, very quickly I realized, oh, wait, there are plenty of people on the left. I wanted it to get played at a MAGA rally. What happened was people on the left misunderstood it. And I said at the time, it's impossible for the right to satire liberal views in song that would fool a liberal.
It's true.
Whereas you can fool a MAGA by just putting their talking points in there. But what I realized was I fooled liberals unintentionally by making us a MAGA song because it sounded legit to them. And so it was, there was a lot of, that was not what I expected would happen.
I saw Father John Misty the other night, and he has some songs that are kind of in the voice of some Trump hat wearing dad or whatever.
Yeah.
And he kind of has to announce at the start of the song now, this is a song about, Trump hat wearing dad giving bad advice to his daughter. 2, 3, 4. Like,
right. So please don't,
he's got to bracket it.
But in the late 80s and early 90s, it was a lot clearer when you were being satirical, even though there was, by that point in time, quite a history of corporations subverting the détournement and turning it into a recuperative kind of like, oh, punk rock, you want anarchy? Well, we'll sell it to you at Walmart.
Des détournements.
Des détournements. So Adbusters kind of took off, and I don't know, you've never seen the magazine?
No. What does it look like? Does it look like a magazine, like a glossy magazine?
It looks like a pretty slick magazine.
So would they actually sell it at newsstands and stuff, or did you have to be part of the movement? Or
Absolutely. I sold it at my newsstand. I was aware of it before I started working at the newsstand, but once I worked there, I read it it was bi-monthly. At its peak, it had 120,000 subscribers.
Well, it looks really stylish and well designed. Is that part of the gag?
Yeah.
That we're against everything that glossy magazines are doing to you. Here's our glossy magazine that tells you so.
Well, and also recognizing that the gloss is effective, and let's
use the tools of the oppressor against him.
Yeah, and also, there's nothing intrinsically evil about good photography and good quality paper. It's the message contained within. And if there's real power to good photographs, I mean, this is kind of the problem often with revolutionary leaflets is that they're made to look hand scrawled because there's a sense of it being more authentic.
Authenticity.
But of course, you see those things, and I mean, your mind blots those out just as it does the golden arches. Somebody hands you a leaflet on the street that says, socialism, smash the state, and you're like, yeah, I get it.
Oh, well, good. A crazy Xerox thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lost dog. And what Adbusters did was they came in kind of during that. There was also that period, or during this same period, there was a groundswell of monkey wrenching, right? The idea that these corporations, particularly the ones cutting down the forests and building giant salmon killing dams and all these, causes that the environmental movement located as, this is before global warming was well understood. And what environmentalism looked like was we're losing all these species, we're losing habitats, we're losing the, and it coincides with global warming.
Still relevant.
Turns out. But monkey wrenching was a form of direct action that involved these doctrines of sort of these bulldozers,
sabotage, right?
Yeah, it's a form of sabotage and justified by the ends, justifying the means. And so destroying these bulldozers, although it's vandalism and absolutely attracts the attention of the sheriff, it's justified because these companies have no right to decimate the forests in this way. And there were a couple of famous novels, famously The Monkey Wrench Gang.
Edward Abbey.
And so Adbusters took that mentality and migrated it over to the world of visual media advertising as a form of, again, a conviction that these companies have no right to cloud our minds. And so vandalism in this context is appropriate. And Adbusters encouraged a lot of sort of ironic direct action in the form of climbing up and defacing billboards, but not defacing them, just spray painting over them, but actually changing the message,
subversively.
Making the Marlboro Man have crossed eyes, or
Got him.
Or saying like, oh, this SUV, like, do you have a micro penis? A lot of this kind of subversion that was meant to shock people out of their complacency. At the time, late 90s, I actually joined a group of billboard defacers, and we had secret missions. It's the statute of limitations is over now, but we bought walkie-talkies, and one of us was a pretty athletic, acrobatic person.
It's got to be hard to get up there, right?
And so we had lookouts that we would post on street corners, 2 blocks away from the billboard we decided to target. And we would do all this preparation, prepare wheat paste signage that we, kind of thumbnail measured how it would fit on the billboard. And
I assume high production value. Like, it looks good, right?
Tried to duplicate the graphic art.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was no good at any of that stuff, but I was muscle and was capable of kind of manning my corner. And we'd go out at 2:00 in the morning, and our acrobatic sort of ringleader would hoist himself up, and anytime there was a car coming, we'd get on the walkie-talkies like, car! And we probably worked on a dozen billboards in Seattle over the course of a year.
Were you guys just a little collective deciding how to do it yourselves,
Yeah.
or was somebody sending down assignments?
We were just inspired by the idea, and like a lot of the stuff, like there was a brief period in the early 90s where I had been converted to the idea that tagging, and particularly big graffiti pieces, were a sort of necessary reclaiming of these brutalist industrial environments under the freeways, all these places where the infrastructure and the civic landscape had been turned into a completely lifeless concrete corridor where the wind just blew trash. And to go down there and paint big, beautiful graffiti piece was a way of humanizing these spaces. And I was really enamored with the viewpoint. Although I may not have fully adopted it emotionally, I did sort of, I understood it, and I agreed with it. And I had a tag. I'd been sort of gifted this tag by a group of graffitiists, taggers.
I didn't know you had to be like given
you're given a name. I mean,
like
you can sit and come up with a name, but it makes it was glamorous to have been given a name by some prominent taggers at the time, because I was a street scumbag and I should have my street name. My name was Eggs because I was an egghead.
What?
And so they were like,
because you're a smarty pants for a graffiti artist.
Yeah, I was like, oh, he's the egghead. He knows all about the do. And so I was.
This is the same way they name like the members of a Saturday morning cartoon team. You're the hacker in the wheelchair now.
Yeah. You're Greaseball, or it's how they name Top Gun pilots.
Exactly.
But the problem with Eggs is it's an extremely hard tag to draw. How do you draw E and 2 G's and an S? If your tag is like ants, that's like cool, eggs. And so I started drawing the G's like, the little O and then the big O with the little tail and the hair but that's very involved. But gradually I felt like I fell off with graffiti art as I watched tags go up on, like nice like on the side of the library. And I was like, you're not taking back
if you're tagging a mural, like the mural was already the tag.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't like, if you can believe it, the vast majority of graffiti taggers, like the majority of skateboarders, are not geniuses.
I don't believe it.
And so there was a kind of like, wait a minute, what are we doing? Well, I'm not out here to ruin a church, but
come on, eggs.
Anyway, yeah, I know. Hey, eggs, anyway, Adbusters initiated Buy Nothing Day.
No way.
Yeah.
Buy Nothing Day did not exist.
No, Buy Nothing Day was Adbusters trying to, again, get the word out, recolonize the space or decolonize the space by saying, buy nothing on this day, and that will radicalize people because everybody can understand that, right? It's a rejection of consumerism, but it actually kind of saves you the hassle. I mean, it's easy to grok, right? It's not like buy nothing this year.
It's not, yeah. I mean, and maybe that's a criticism of it, that it's it's an easy, comfortable kind of slacktivism thing to do.
Well, and this was an active criticism of it. I think it was Naomi Klein, who wrote a book called No Logo, who said, Buy Nothing Day became like a triple irony when she saw Buy Nothing Day merch.
But don't buy it.
And she was,
buy this tomorrow.
You can buy it the day before, right?
Yeah.
Adbusters initiated TV Turnoff Week.
Mm.
And TV Turnoff Week, I mean, and that's obviously much harder to spend an entire week, Ken,
you can still watch streaming, right?
No.
What?
No.
What about HBO?
No, I'm sorry.
It's not TV. It's HBO.
Nope.
I'm not against, I don't like that kind of criticism that, this is such an easy, small thing. I mean, maybe that's how you win hearts and minds, like maybe this is the anti-consumerist thing that somebody will try first.
Right. Well, and TV Turnoff Week gradually evolved into Digital Detox Week.
Mm.
Can you go a week with no electronic device?
Is that rhetorical? Because no, I can't.
Well, and most people can't. So on the cruise that you and I both took a couple of years ago, a character named David Reese, an artist who drew the Get Your War On comic strip in all the alternative papers back during the Bush administration. David Reese had a group called the Internet Chastity Society, right? Or the Internet Temperance Society, where he asked a bunch of people to agree that they would surrender their phones at the beginning and not look at the internet for 7 days. And a bunch of people did, but it was a lot harder than it seems. But Adbusters, they employed flash mobs. They employed stickering. There was that series where Tiger Woods' smile got replaced with a Nike logo. And a lot of it was...
Did they face lawsuits on IP grounds? Because, they're reappropriating...
Well, if you think about... and I've considered doing this as an omnibus episode, and may still, but the Negative Land band...
Right.
Putting out records called U2 and Pepsi.
Did they lose that suit? I can't remember.
They really tried to get sued, and I think... Ultimately,
maybe nobody did.
No, they did get sued. U2 sued them. Well, I'll save that for the episode I do on that topic. Ultimately, Adbusters sued the Canadian broadcasters for refusing to take their ad buys. And in 2004. Wait a minute. No, they sued him in 2004. It wasn't until 2009 that the BC Court of Appeals reversed the BC Supreme Court and said that Adbusters could sue. They still haven't.
It was just like a standing issue.
Yeah, they still haven't. They still haven't won the suit. And the argument against it, well, and this is in the suit, in the defense of their lawsuit. The CBC said that their ads would upset advertisers and contaminate the purity of the media environment.
Wow.
Designed exclusively for commerce.
If advertising is questioned, that makes the environment impure. The purity of the environment means all advertising goes unquestioned.
So here I see the only network that agreed to air their ads was CNN.
I mean, you can see why. Like the networks also rely on there being an eager set of powerful corporations that want to fund them.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't exist if the idea of television advertising seems icky or creepy.
Well, part of the difficulty of this episode is that during the course of this episode, there will be, I think, 1 or 2 instances where you and I read and improvise around a script
in our cool
hip way.
In a cool self-aware way.
Yeah, where we're like, ha, 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 but here we are.
But still, we took the money.
Yeah, trying to earn some portion of our living from selling products. And we're grateful to the companies that understand that podcast audiences are ones that you can advertise to. But we both, I think, would prefer to live in a world where we didn't do ads, particularly this afternoon when we're both really exhausted and we still have to record 2 ads.
Maybe we should just start the culture jamming now and not record those ads.
As people listen to the show, understand that we appreciate the irony, but that also satire is dead because Kissinger won the Nobel Peace Prize. So where are we? We're just 2 regular guys just trying to make it in the big city.
You're just eggs.
Support our Patreon. In the 2010s, Adbusters actually entered into the commercial world, developing a sneaker called the Black Spot Sneaker, which was designed by Fluvog. It's entirely vegan, made out of shredded tires, and they found a union shop that would manufacture it, albeit in Portugal. And they started advertising the Black Spot Sneaker as a kind of example of grassroots capitalism.
Oh, I see. This sneaker is not a critique. It's a genuine sneaker.
It's a sneaker. This is just they are, I mean, it's basically like a lot of companies kind of co-opted this. We're not trying to make a profit. We're just trying to make the best thing possible. And again, in the sort of Naomi Klein criticism of it, a lot of people said, well, wait a minute, there's no longer any tension between mainstream and alternative culture. Alternative culture is trying to take a market share of, and whatever their methods, whatever their end result, it's still information pollution. And, you're not finding Black Spot Sneakers because there's somebody at Speaker's Corner behind a overturned apple crate. You're finding it because there are ads for it. And it's competing against whatever, Nike sneakers. It's part of this ethos of put your dollar in a direction that supports the fight for climate change, but it's just a version of the same materialism. It's lost the idea that we are fighting the spectacle and looking for some clarity.
I mean, if you're worried about the spectacle and the density and the noise, the correct response is to not put out a magazine, which merely adds to the density of.
The initial idea of the magazine was take these methods and go tear it down. And then once, unlike all idealists, like once everybody's aware of advertising has snuck into our world, we won't need this magazine anymore because, we'll have stopped all the billboards.
But the magazine's self-perpetuating. And even if you start it with the best of intentions, it's always going to be like, all right, we got to put out another issue of this anti-magazine magazine. It becomes its own justification for its own existence.
Yeah, it was described as the rebel cell. It's a rebel cell. Cry more, more, more. Well, in 2011, in recent memory, if you recall the Arab Spring protests, and in particularly in Egypt, in Tahrir Square, there was a profound sense that protests could actually cleanse what had up until then, the Mubarak administration or the Mubarak dictatorship did not seem vulnerable to street criticism. But there was this tremendous wellspring, and I think a lot of people tried to, and successfully, I think, argue that social media and the internet facilitated this uprising throughout the Arab world, and it produced mixed results. Gaddafi and Mubarak were out, but Assad destroyed his own country.
Yeah, a lot of it didn't take.
But watching the Arab Spring in those early days of feeling that great hope, the people running Adbusters, who were extremely frustrated by the great bailout after the economic collapse in 2008, came up with an idea called Occupy Wall Street and promoted their idea. We're all going to march on Wall Street on this particular day, and sent it out through their many activist networks.
I had no idea.
And got a lot of sort of their contemporaries and other groups that were planning protests and other groups that had that then allied themselves with this movement. And the New York City police got a little bit of they got some advance warning enough that they closed off a couple of areas in New York that had been considered for Occupy, but they eventually settled on Zuccotti Park, and Occupy became then an incredible media event that since then has spread to kind of a global movement of not really an existential occupation at all, but a literal physical interruption.
I was reminded the other day that the idea of forgiving student debt was not even in the public sphere, and it started out as kind of a crazy leaflet Occupy Wall Street idea, and it's now official U.S. domestic policy because you can colonize good thoughts as well as intrusive ones.
Right, and it's interesting to see the transmutation of this situationist notion that we were being hypnotized to one of,
we can hypnotize too.
I mean, well, it's not even that. It's just storming the barricades, right?
Yeah.
There's very little difference between Occupy Wall Street and storming the Bastille. The only difference being that they didn't actually get inside, and
they smoked some pot in the park.
Yeah, and banged on some drums, but they have changed the course of the world. It just became a lot more materialist.
And that concludes Adbusters. entry 014.HG0105, certificate number 29414, in the omnibus. Now, let's advertise ourselves for a moment.
Hey!
And our sustainable Portuguese websites that we've created.
Sustainable website.
At Omnibus Project, we're at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick on social media. You can email us your screeds, anti-corporate screeds, at the omnibusproject@gmail.com. Mail us your unwanted corporatist items. That's what would really show up these multinationals.
A bunch of
Is if you just
Air Jordans that are
Yeah.
still in their boxes.
If you were to just send us a bunch of like Rolex watches to P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155.
What is the materialist thing that best or most defines you?
I don't know.
Is it status on Alaska Airlines? What is it? Is it
Yeah, airline status.
is it your electric car? No,
No,
it's not your
It's
fashion.
it's probably like a home theater, right? It's like
Right.
they're not expensive, but like,
Well, you've
it's
got-
nice to have a movie theater screen in your house.
I mean, that incredible collection of bound comic books from the last century. Pretty astonishing. But if there was a fire in your house, you wouldn't grab your bound volumes of Pogo, would you? What would you?
Yeah, I actually would. It would be Pogo first. No, I
all
don't
those
even know.
Fantagraphics Peanuts collections,
Oh man, those would be second. You probably just. I mean, what do you grab? You don't grab
photo albums.
photo albums.
Yeah.
I guess in my house, art would be a runner-up.
Oh yeah, right.
But photo albums for sure. Except now that's all digital. Since I mentioned the P.O. box, Laura. Oh no. Check this out. If you say my name in the outro of a future episode, it rhymes with Sarah or Tara. It's
Lara.
not Laura or Lara.
Lara.
Hello, Lara. Thank you for sending Kal-El to Earth. He's doing a great job here. Lara sent us a 1928 reprint of Elbert Hubbard's biographical series, Little Journeys to the Homes of the Great. I think this was in which omnibus was this? Was it is he the Be It Ever So Humble, There's No Place Like Home guy?
I don't remember the episode we just did.
Oh, it's a message to Garcia. This is the guy that wrote A Message to Garcia. And this is a collection of his works. Lara thought this was perfect because one is about authors. That's for me. And one is about businessmen because you're the CEO of the Roderick Group.
Yeah.
So, these are very nice. Here's a biography of William Morris.
These are from 1920.
Yeah, these are late 20s reprints.
Oh, that William Morris is, that plays right in.
Yeah, I'm going to save my William Morris wallpaper if there's a fire. And here's yours that has biographies of Andrew Carnegie and John Jacob Astor. So that's very exciting. And in fact, she sent us this fake chick tract.
What?
It's from the Seattle Burning Man community. Didn't somebody tell us about these? I feel like maybe we've received these before.
I don't recall receiving a chick tract from Burning Man.
Yeah, it's based on a guy named the Seattle Burning Man community. I guess had a guy named David Peterman who is lampooned herein. So hilarious in jokes if you know a lot about the Seattle Burning Man community. The idea is they would leave these like chick tracts and turn people on to.
Oh, so it's a little bit of culture jamming. Let me see it.
Yes, this is culture jamming. If you feel the problem with our culture is not enough people going to Burning Man,
The Peterman plan.
whereas I tend to be, have the opposite point of view.
These look pretty legit.
I thought it was a chick tract when I opened it.
Welcome to the Burner Newbie Picnic. Wow, thanks.
I believe somebody sent us one of these before, Lara. So we're going to assemble a full set of fake chick tract parodies.
Oh my God, this is 100% gibberish if you are not a total dyed-in-the-wool member of this subculture.
Please stop interrupting me. I'm reading my biography of William Morris.
Wait, I thought that was the one you were giving me.
Oh, you're getting John Jacob Astor
Oh,
and Andrew Carnegie.
wow. This is really, really insider.
Thank you so much, Lara. And I apologize. I said your name right several times to make up for saying it wrong once. You can find other listeners of the show by looking for the Futurelings on Facebook and Discord and Reddit, etc. Go to patreon.com/omnibusproject to support the show with really the only currency that matters, actual currency. This is a way of culture jamming because it'll keep us from recording as many ads.
I got to say about this fake chick track that it's twice as long as a regular chick track, and none of it makes any sense
Maybe
at all.
it just seems twice as long. The art is not as good as the good chick track artist, but it's roughly the same as like kind of your average replacement chick track.
They do a pretty good job with that. It's just like, what are you talking about?
That's the whole Burning Man vibe.
Maybe, you know what? Maybe I should do a Burning Man episode and just read that aloud.
We can annotate it. We can try to explain it. The Seattle Burning Man community needs this. Attention must be paid.
I know a couple of people that are Seattle Burning Man adjacent. So.
SBMA?
Mm-hmm. Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope you many goods and cheese.
We hope you many goods and cheese.
And wish you to be back with you soon for another entry in the hour.